brothers, sisters, permit me a brief dive into fiction and its comparison to reality. Now, I love the Star Wars franchise. The Force, the idea of the Force, the idea of two different sides of the Force, and the way they describe it is incredibly similar to Taoism. And if you read from the Tao Te Ching, which I actually have right here, should have grabbed it before I started recording, but there's a number of passages, Tao Te Ching, that remind us of the idea of the Force in Star Wars, because this is kind of where Lucas got it from. I'm not sure if he did it consciously, but it's spitting image. So, 63. Act without doing, work without effort. Think of the small as large, and the few as many. Confront the difficult, while it is still easy. Accomplish the great task by a series of small actions. The master never reaches for the great, thus she achieves greatness. When she runs into difficulty, she stops and gives herself to it. She doesn't cling to her own comfort, thus problems are no problem for her. Let's read a couple other passages. In harmony with the Tao, the sky is clear and spacious. The earth is solid and full. All creatures flourish together, content with the way they are, endlessly repeating themselves, endlessly renewed. When man interferes with the Tao, the sky becomes filthy, the earth becomes depleted, the equilibrium crumbles, creatures become extinct. The master views the parts with compassion because he understands the whole. His constant practice is humility. He doesn't glitter like a jewel, but lets himself be shaped by the Tao, as rugged and common as a stone. And now some of these ideas seem like they're coming from a Jedi perspective. The idea of balance and harmony, and not working against the Force, but working with it. And also not creating corruptions in this world by not fighting the Force that manifests throughout the world in different forms. Everything's a part of this Force, the Tao. So let's read a couple other ones. I'm just picking them at random because this book's very important, but also you'll start to get a sense of how connected to Star Wars it is, because Lucas copied a bit, I think. This verse sounds very Jedi as well. Weapons are the tools of violence. All decent men detest them. Weapons are the tools of fear. A decent man will avoid them, except in the direst necessity, and if compelled, will use them only with the utmost restraint. Peace is his highest value. If the peace has been shattered, how can he be content? His enemies are not demons, but human beings like himself. He doesn't wish them personal harm, nor does he rejoice in victory. How could he rejoice in victory and delight in the slaughter of men? He enters a battle gravely, with sorrow and with great compassion, and as if he were attending a funeral, not glorying in the victory over, the Sith or the Empire, but doing what is necessary, only using weapons when you have to. Very, very Jedi, but also very similar to a lot of different paths, to be honest. Now, here's something that's a little bit interesting and kind of like combines both paths, the Jedi and the Sith in a way, and I'm just flipping to this randomly. Success is as dangerous as failure. Hope is as hollow as fear. What does it mean that success is as dangerous as failure? Whether you go up the ladder or down it, your position is shaky. When you stand with your 2 feet on the ground, you will always keep your balance. What does it mean that hope is as hollow as fear? Hope and fear are both phantoms that arise from thinking of the self. When we don't see the self as self, what do we have to fear? See the world as yourself. Have faith in the way things are. Love the world as yourself. Then you can care for all things. So and I'll just read one more. I know I'm reading a lot from this Tao Te Ching, but I'm trying to give you a general sense of the connections that I am about to make. And I would like to say that The Sith, the Jedi are very much inspired by the traditional Tao Te Ching and its interpretations. The Sith seem more what the Tao Te Ching is warning against a lot of the time. So it's still considered by the Tao Te Ching the Sith. Tao Te Ching considers somebody like the Sith and refers to it and gives advice in the other direction towards this comparison. In this comparison, to be the Jedi, but there's a lot of also deeper meanings that there is not two. It's not about duality. It's not one side, fighting the other. It's more about the way of things and how the Force manifests in many different ways, and that when you consider things as being different, when you consider things as being good or bad, then you're not really understanding that everything is a part of that same energy, that same force, that everything's a part of. It's very Vedantic. I believe that all spiritual traditions, or at least the vast majority, the very ancient ones, and some newer ones, came from India. So let's go to another. Do you want to improve the world? I don't think it can be done. The world is sacred. It can't be improved. If you tamper with it, you'll ruin it. If you treat it like an object, you'll lose it. There is a time for being ahead, a time for being behind, a time for being in motion, a time for being at rest, a time for being vigorous, a time for being exhausted, a time for being safe, a time for being in danger. The Master sees things as they are, without trying to control them. She lets them go their own way and resides at the center of the circle. So we're looking at like a cosmic understanding, this idea of center everywhere, circumference nowhere, as Paramahansa Yogananda said. So in a lot of traditions, we have differentiation between beings and, whatever it's fighting. So, this is the way, the other way, this is evil. And I'm being very vague because I'm talking about not just Abrahamic traditions, but others as well. There's the bad side and the good side. And you embrace the good side and then you hate the bad side. And there's always been people that have kind of understood that it's all part of the same thing. And there's been even more people than that who have embraced the so-called bad side. I think that we have to seek balance. But I also think that in reference to the Sith and the Jedi, a lot of people understand those movies through a certain lens. Like, okay, this is why the Sith failed. This is why the Jedi failed. And we have this false paradigm of if something succeeds, then it's going to be that way forever. That's just not the case. The Sith didn't fail. The Jedi didn't fail. They were destined to go through these cycles of rising and falling. It's not about failure. It's about just being part of the cycle. Now, it's very good to learn from history. It's very good to focus on the mistakes we've made. But when we look at history, we realize that nobody wins for long. Everything is cyclical. It's not point A to point B. And in the Star Wars universe, the Jedi and the Sith, neither side is going to achieve a victory that solidifies their position forever. So there really is no failure in the Star Wars movies. There's no failure in life, whether it comes to a country, whether it comes to a spiritual tradition or a religion. There's no failure. There just has to be an understanding in people's minds that understanding events, energy, all goes through cycles. It's not about achieving something that will be eternal and will never go back to the state that it was when it was at its worst. When it was at its most limiting side, most fearful side, and perhaps even the least followed that it's ever been. Every religion and spiritual path will reach another point where it's the least followed that it's ever been, and to where people are so fearful they use it incorrectly, like people did during the Dark Ages, where they used Christianity in a very bad way. All these things are destined to happen again, and we shouldn't think of, since history is cyclical, well, because human consciousness is cyclical, there isn't failure in the sense of things that we usually understand it as. There is only the cycles, the wheels that turn again and again and again, propelling us to where? Unsure. It's not a stationary wheel. It's propelling us to a goal. But one religion, one spiritual practice, these aren't things that are in and of themselves the ends. They are a method that allows for contrast in this material world to the other side or other polarity. And then as we go through these different shifts, these different changes, these different cycles, slowly we're winding up to a singular point. Whatever that point is, that's another topic. But these cycles exist, truly exist, to propel us. Good and bad, it's bigger than that. Jedi and Sith, it's bigger than that. Truth and falsehood, bigger than that in some ways. Accept what you think you are opposite of. That doesn't mean you don't fight it. You can still fight it. But look at it, analyze it, understand it, and understand that it is necessary to provide you with the polarity that you are most accustomed to, that you are most familiar with, that you love the most. The polarity that you are in, the path that you are in. Thank you very much for watching, and hope all of you have a great day.